The interrogation room of the Black Fortress. Many men and women came in here to be questioned, tortured, or killed in secret. Sun Da knew the horrors that went on within these dark, blood-stained, cobbled walls, and the knowledge made his skin crawl. He adjusted his silk robes, and his hands itched for his sword, though it had been taken from him. He walked along the edges of the walls in his chamber, careful not to touch the red-stained stones, as he knew just what those stones were, and the thought repulsed him. He was no stranger to bloodshed, but he didn't like the idea of touching another's blood if he could avoid it. Finally the door opened, and in marched the man that made Sun Da sneer. Tall, brutish, broad-shouldered, and with a face carved into a detestable snarl. He had his skull helmet off, and under his arm and in his other hand a bag with round bulges. His brown eyes were dark like pools of ink, and his teeth were bared in an expression that told Sun Da just how much he wanted to draw blood. "What is the meaning of this?" Sun Da finally snapped. "I am dragged from my study and thrown into this disgusting place. Do you know who I am, Gaius?" Gaius Varus just glared him down. "Who are you?" "I'm not so sure. I'm still weighing between liability and traitor." "Traitor?" Sun Da shouted. "How dare you? I have kept my deal with Horkos. I have not done one thing to break our agreement. Astra has had nothing but the highest of praise for my work, and my loyalty to Horkos is unquestionable." "Be silent!" Gaius snarled. "You were never loyal, Sun Da. Your loyalty was always under the firm grip of blackmail and guilt. Your only concern is, and always was, with your own power and glory. I know all about what you did to win the favor of your emperor, the blood of your own family that you spilt for his favor. You betray everyone you work for, and you think I'm foolish enough to not think you do the same again? Loyalty like that has no value, and can flip like a coin. I never agreed with what Astrid said about you, and I can tell you how thrilled I am to be able to finally put the screws to you." "Very well. Just tell me what you think I did wrong. I will clear my name and leave this place," Sun Da snapped. "Who is Anying Wuxia?" Gaius demanded. Sun Da stopped and stared at Gaius with confusion. "What? Anying Wuxia? Shadow Dancer? I've never heard of them. Haven't you? Oh, well, that's strange, Sun Da. They've heard of you!" He then yanked the bulging bag up and dumped it on the table. From out of the burlap sack, no less than 5 human heads tumbled out, each one belonging to a Wu Lin, bloody with mouths hanging open. Sun Da jumped back in shock as each head hit the table with a resounding noise and then rolled to the floor. The last item to fall out of the bag was a long strand of parchment with Chinese characters written on it. Sun Da picked it up and read the script. "To the traitor Sun Da, the Shadow Dancer," Sun Da read. "These 5 Wulin officers were killed, cut down, with that same paper laying by their decapitated heads. And they aren't the first," Gaius snapped. "No less than 4 encampments have been attacked in the dark. Survivors report a single woman among the attackers, wrapped in the shadows themselves. She dances her way through the camp, and wherever her blades touch, blood flows." Sun Da wrinkled his nose. "Varus, you know better than to believe crazy stories like this. It's all superstition and nonsense. You're wasting my time. You know, I thought so too, so I decided to stay at one of the encampments to catch this shadow. And then she attacked. She. You saw her? Wu Lin," he snapped. "Female, wielding 2 hooked swords and adorned in purple and black garments, hair tied up in 2 small buns and a single long braid. She fought as if she were dancing under the moon." Sun Da's eyes widened a little and he sank back. "She did she?" "It couldn't be," he mumbled. "So she got away before I could apprehend her. So now I want to know, Sun Da. Who the hell is she and what do you have to do with her? What makes you think I know anything about it?" Sun Da snarled. Gaius only lunged forward and grabbed Sun Da by the throat, shoving him against the cold wall of the chamber, glaring daggers into his eyes. "How about the cold sweat running down your useless neck? Who is she?" "Do you think you intimidate me, Gaius?" Sun Da challenged. They both glared at each other. Gaius smirked and finally let him go. "You're not stupid enough to test me. Let's face it, we're both traitors, Sun Da. You and I are both bound for the same circle of hell. So how about we stop playing this game? Tell me who she is, or I'll send you to that circle first." Sunda bit his lip, calculating every option he had. Every chance, every choice he could make. But he finally gave a heavy sigh. He won nothing by being silent. He had no weapon with which to fight Gaius, and even if he did, there was no point. This knowledge would not change anything. "Her name is Lin Mei Hua. And yes, I knew her." Her raven black hair reflects the light of the lanterns, making it dazzle and shimmer like starlight in a clear night sky. Her eyes twinkle merrily like candles dancing in a bedroom. Her lips smiling pleasantly as her body moves like a river over rocks and around bends. Lin Mei Hua does not dance so much as she does enthrall. Those who watch her perform are enraptured by the performance. Her body seems not of this world, her features belonging to heaven itself. Few would have guessed that her father was just a minor officer in the Grand Wulin army, someone of low rank and meager station. Her mother was a simple farmer's daughter. She had no title to her name. Her mother and father lived off of little, but they risked their lives daily. To help them make money, Lin Mei would sing and dance folk songs and ballads in the towns and villages of China. To the people of China who were still suffering the effects of a long civil war, she was like an angel who had come to bring them hope and levity. She brought much to China, much to her family, and this was enough for her. It was not long before she was discovered by Gao Lei, the emperor of the Wulin and all of China. Taking an interest in her youth and her beauty, Gao Lei offered her a place among his consorts and courtesans. Because of his lowly station, her father was at risk of being sent on suicide missions or as an expendable pawn. Fearing for him and his safety, Lin Mei saw this as her only way to save his life. If she became a valued servant of the emperor, then her station would surely keep her family safe as well. Her wish was granted. Her family wanted for nothing. Her father was promoted and named a colonel in the emperor's army, and thus was not made to endure anything life-threatening. Her mother no longer had to toil endlessly in the fields and could be allowed to rest in luxury. It was all Lin Mei Hua wanted. But, of course, she had to pay the price for this boon. She would dance for the emperor when he asked, sing in his presence and for his guests and supporters, and in return her family had station, honor, and glory. Lin Mei Hua was a jade shining in a dark cavern, a picture of beauty among worn and cantankerous old warriors. More than a few times had lustful nobility and soldiers solicited her for pleasurable company and private activities. She was powerless to refuse them, for to do so may destroy the life she had won for her and her family. For the sake of her mother and father, she would accept these humiliations. The Emperor Gao Lei was not averse to using her for his personal enjoyment. It was his right as emperor, and her honor to come when he called. This was all the fate of a lotus blooming in the murk. She would endure it. She would accept it. She would embrace it. All because it was what her family needed to maintain where it was, to have this future that they needed. She would make the sacrifice. Her father and mother spoke to her often, asking her to not continue this. It was fine. They didn't need the luxury. They didn't need all this fine linen, these fine jewels and gold, or the fancy promotions or titles. They wanted her to be happy. But Lin Mei Hua told them their happiness and their comfort was her happiness. Things began to change when war returned to the heart of the Wulin. Gao Lei began his invasion of Heathmoor, and the need of a beautiful dancer and singer was no longer as important as having warriors at his side. To ensure she was not cast out or forgotten, Lin Mei began training herself to use weapons, to dance with swords and fight with them in equal measure. Desperation to not be tossed aside pushed her to master the blade, to become a lethal weapon in service of the Wulin. She did not think she would have to use these newfound skills in real battle. After all, Gao Lei believed the people of this land to be weak and fragile, peace-loving fools who would break under the back of the mighty Wulin and his prized blue dragon. But the people of this land were more resilient than he had expected. The knights of Ashfeld, Vikings of Valkenheim, and samurai of the Mire seemed nigh unbreakable. Even their greatest victories seemed to only bolster the resolve of their foes. Long and drawn-out battle forced even the San Hu out to do war, and all could tell Gao Lei was beginning to feel pressured. If this invasion of Heathmoor failed, if he was defeated here and forced to retreat back to China, then surely the people would believe he'd lost the Tian Ming, the mandate of heaven. They would call for his head, and elevate the famed Tian Xilong, the blue dragon, to his place. For Lin Mei, she could only do as she always had. Dance, sing, perform. She would do as long as she was able to, as long as she still found favor, as long as the emperor was pleased. She would ensure a happy life for her family and her people, even if it cost her everything. And then it happened. The unthinkable. The betrayal. "How did you know her, Sunda? Who was she?" Gaius demanded furiously. Sunda rubbed his neck where he'd been grabbed. "She was a courtesan, a singer and dancer for the imperial court. Nothing more than that," Sunda snapped. "Are you actually telling me our forces are being decimated by some dancer girl? I never said she was not dangerous," Sunda barked. "Your arrogance is astounding. You and all of Heathmore. How long will you look down on us, Wu Lin? How long will you ignore us? You consider us lesser than you, easily bested and forgotten. Yet in your avarice, you do not realize that it is the predator you overlook that will strike you from behind. I warned Astria of that long ago. I warned her then that she would do well not to underestimate the strength of China and the Wu Lin, and now you understand. All too late now. I don't care about your grandstanding, Sunda. I want to know what she's after. Why is she killing her fellow Wu Lin? And why does she mention you by name?" Sunda grit his teeth and looked away. "At a guess, it would be because of Cheng Pass." "You mean the explosion? I already know about that. But what does that have to do with her?" "Do you know, Gaius, that you should never depend on anything too greatly? Even your own shadow will abandon you when you are in the darkness." "Is that a proverb?" "It's a truth. And that day when Gao Lei was defeated, all of us were thrown into darkness, but none more so than Lin Mei Hua, and even her shadow abandoned that child." Hell is just a word to many. To some, it is an imaginary afterlife. To others, it's a single bad day. To others, it's an existential concept beyond the understanding of man. But to Lin Mei Hua, it was her life after the fall of the Wu Lin. Sunda's accident at Chang Pass led to the weakness in their defenses and the attack of the supposed Blackstone remnants. Though the warriors of Gao Lei fought viciously to defend him, they failed. Gao Lei and many of his generals and followers were brought before Astria. Those who did not join her willingly were executed, one by one. Sunda, exposed as the one behind the explosion, was the only one Astria did not threaten with death. He had two options. He would either return home to his people, where he would suffer the rest of his days with the contempt of all of China, or he would join Astria and lend her his services. He chose the latter. And Gao Lei, the emperor for his part, was exiled, without a leader of the Wu Lin. Any Wu Lin who did not join Astria willingly would be left by the wayside, wandering vagabonds with nothing to call home. Lin Mei Hua, the beautiful performer for the emperor, had lost it all. She was captured and held with the other courtesans seized from the palace. She was made to watch the executions of the officers who did not betray the emperor. Her father among them. Her father, ranked colonel thanks to her, was now at Astria's feet. He was offered the chance to join her, but he refused. Looking the she-wolf in the eyes, he stood his ground and spat his defiance like a cobra spits venom. Lin Mei would never forget Astria's laugh as she plunged her sword through her father's throat. She screamed, but not nearly as loud as her own mother did, when her mother broke from her hiding place to her husband. She was peppered with crossbow bolts before she got within 10 meters of Astria. Lin Mei lamented, screamed, wailed, and howled to the heavens. She was held down and forced to watch her father die at Astria's feet, and her mother's corpse to be butchered and played with by Horko's soldiers. She watched in abject horror, and though she cried out to them, to her emperor, and for any form of salvation, no salvation would come, and hell set itself in her soul. The child who had given of herself everything she had for her mother and father watched as those very gifts she'd offered assured their demise. But she herself was not spared the ire or the mistreatment of her captors. Lin Mei was taken from fortress to fortress, made to watch the gains and victories of Horkos and the suffering of not only her own people, but all that Horkos affected. The sights and sounds and smells she was forced to experience left their mark on her memory. At first she was defiant like her father, unwilling to bend to Astria or Horkos. But defiance was not honored, nor was it praised. When she defied her masters, a less desirable courtesan was killed or maimed. To protect her fellow servants and courtesans, Lin Mei once again did what she'd always done. Perform when asked, dance when ordered, sing when directed, and give her body over when called. But all the while she gathered in her heart a cold resentment, a dark fury against those cowardly Wulin who betrayed their emperor, who still drew breath while her father had died, against Sun Da, the man who allowed the defeat to take place in the first place and condemned her to this fate. And yet, despite it all, despite all of her anger, resentment, and hatred for them, she could not bring herself to draw a blade yet. Thankfully for Lin Mei, a twist of fate would come her way. The attack of the fledgling Chimera Alliance during the Battle of the Eclipse had greatly lessened the security at her place of captivity, and she was able to escape the fortress. After killing her guard with a blade to his throat, she fled the chains of Horkos that held her and left into the unfamiliar and terrifying land of Heathmoor. Alone and with nowhere to call her home, she traveled between the lands seeking shelter. The mire, home of the samurai, was not welcoming. The samurai held resentment to the Chinese from ancient days. Their old animosity towards the Chinese and their soldiers was still fresh in their hearts, and no quarter was given to the wandering flower. The Vikings were no better. It had been the Vikings who had been struck the hardest by the Wulin invasion, and the sight of her did nothing to win their favor. The knights did not turn her away from Ashfeld necessarily, but the citizens were not kind. Many saw her as an invader, and those who did not saw her as a tool. For a time, Lin Mei found shelter in a cathedral run by a convent. There she stayed for a few months under the watchful protection of a kindly nun named Deborah. But when the convent was attacked by a wicked knight order called the Order of Samus, she was forced to flee for her life once again. 4 years since the loss of her emperor and her family, she found herself lost and alone in the cold and unforgiving land of Heathmoor. Lin Mei Hua collapsed in the wilds, at the border of Valkenheim and Ashfeld. There in the mountains, she did not know she would die alone, bitter and hungry. It was to be her fate. All her life she'd given her heart, her body, her voice, and herself to others. She sacrificed her dignity, her shame, her energy, and her future, and all she had to show for it was a grave of autumn leaves, and not even a shadow beneath her in this world that was gradually going dark. But this was not the end of her story. "So what do you think she's doing all this for? Simple revenge? To get back at you and the other traitor Wulin officers and generals?" Sun Da's eyes narrowed a moment and he shook his head. "It's not in her character," he answered. "Seems simple enough to me," Gaius answered. "You hurt her. You took everything from her. So she hates you, resents you. If it were me, I'd want your head on a pike. But she's nothing like you or I, Varys." Sun Da shook his head. "The girl is foolishly selfless. All she suffered as a courtesan under Gao Lei was for the good of her parents and for her home in China. She never once asked for anything herself, least of all fairness or justice. Revenge is an act of selfish desire, to take justice into your own hands and see punishment done by your own deeds. But she isn't the type to carry such selfish nature. And yet how do you answer the note she left you? The Wulin she's slain. She hasn't done it for herself. No. If I had to guess, she's doing it for someone else." "Who?" "Qilong. The Blue Dragon?" Gaius asked. "That old bastard? You think she's joined forces with him?" "It's a likely possibility. On some level, I think Heathmoor has changed her. True, she is certainly not the little lotus blossom she used to be, but I do not think she would have the nerve, strength, or will, or selfishness in her heart to seek revenge for herself. No, I think she is doing it for something higher than revenge, which makes me believe she is serving another master." "Why Qilong, though? What can he give her?" "Not what he can give her. Remember, she is not selfish. She is doing it for him, to make him the new Wulin Emperor." Gaius scoffed, but Sun Da stood resolute. Many in China respected Qilong far more than Gao Lei. He was always more popular, skilled, and wise. It would make sense that she wants to see him claiming the throne and reunifying the Wulin, and to do that, she will kill those who betrayed the throne in his name. "I thought you said she wasn't taking revenge." "It's not revenge for herself. It's not really for her own sake she's doing any of this. Lin Mei has always been a tool. A gorgeous specimen, but a tool nonetheless. A flower, a blade, a singer, a dancer, a whore. She can be all these things for the people she needs to assist, and right now she is what Xilong requires her to be, a dancing shadow. Anying Wuxia, Gaius finished. Yes, I'll bet Xilong came up with that name for her too. Poetical badger that he is, Sunda spat. Well, tool or not, she's a threat now, Ferris snapped. And all we have to go on is that she was just a courtesan to your former emperor and is likely serving the Blue Dragon now. That's all I can surmise at this point, Sunda answered. But truth be told, I have trouble reading that girl. We're total opposites, which is why you and I can't fathom her actions or choices. How do you mean? You said it yourself earlier, Varys. We are both traitors. You betrayed your lord, and I betrayed my emperor. We're both self-serving and looking out for our own interests. Why bother pretending otherwise? I joined Horkos for my sake, and you did what you did for yours. Get to the point. Lin Mei isn't like that. She would never betray her family, her people, or her emperor for anything. She'd sooner die than do such a thing, I'm sure. It's not out of patriotism or some twisted sense of honor or loyalty. In a sense, I believe she sees herself as having less value than others. She would gladly give up her own life, because it would let others of higher value than her go on living. Then she's a foolish bitch, Varys snapped. That she may be. But it also means she has conviction. And one should always be cautious around a creature who has no fear of death. When the girl awoke after 3 days, she found herself in the encampment of the Blue Dragon Corps, led by Tian Xilong himself, Gao Lei's greatest general. She met the wise old man himself, and the sight of him led her to both great elation, but also great fury. Xilong had not been there the day Gao Lei was defeated. He had been away at another battlefield. Shamed at the defeat of his emperor, and shamed further at the betrayal of so many of his fellow Wu Lin, Tian Xilong's honor would not allow him to return to China like this. Rather, he would remain, and see to it that his final orders were fulfilled, to fight the battles of the Wu Lin wherever they may be. He extended a hand of aid to Lin Mei. She could stay in his company, aid the Blue Dragon Corps. She found something there. She gazed at the dragon before her, a remnant of her old life, all she'd lost and all she'd thought beyond her forever, a way out of this hell. She would appear in towns and villages across Heathmoor, a gorgeous woman shrouded in shadows and adorned in the most fair of garments. She was beyond beautiful, her entrancing smile able to beguile the most hardened men. Her swords she danced with flashed like lightning, and her movements had a balance and grace not unlike the very steel she flourished. But no sooner would she arrive than she would disappear again into the dark. She gave no indication of where she went or why, but all could sense the weight of pain, duty, and sorrow on her shoulders. Her family was gone, her country far behind her, the life she'd fought and bled for a thing of distant memory. What was left for her but to find something new to hold on to, something new to seek and to hold. Tian Xilong asked nothing of her. He gave her no orders. He even offered her freedom to return to China, but she had refused him. Bowing her head with the utmost reverence, she had only asked one thing: to serve him. She knew no other life than service, no other life than duty. Tian Xilong, unable to deny her conviction, accepted her as his consort, and she stepped into the role with the same grace she always did. In her heart, she had finally found her home in him, the Blue Dragon, the greatest of the Wu Lin generals. He would become the new emperor of China. He would rise to the throne and would reunite the Wu Lin. There was no doubt in her mind, and she would be his sword in the dark to do this, his dancer in the shadows. For the sake of the family she had lost, the emperor she had failed, the nation she had abandoned, she would do this all for him. She would raise him to the emperor's throne and destroy his enemies, even if it cost her everything in so doing. A dancer in shadows, a blade within a jade stone, a poison within the lotus blossom, a teardrop in the eye of a phoenix. She is the tragic heroine of the Blue Dragon Corps, Lin Mei Hua, the Anying Wuxia.